WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Thanks for joining us here on Flashpoint. I'm Ben Thompson. The race for Attorney General in North Carolina is shaping up to be one of the most competitive and expensive races in North Carolina history. The North Carolina Attorney General holds an immense amount of power and represents all government departments and agencies and provides legal opinions to the governor and the General Assembly. This year, Democratic Congressman Jeff Jackson taking on Republican Congressman Dan Bishop. And as you'll see, both candidates have very different ideas for the role. Congressman Jackson, welcome back to Flashpoint. Good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
All right, so Attorney General, important role here in the state of North Carolina. What would you say is your biggest priority?
Biggest priority, the day one priority, has to be fentanyl. We're losing an average of 9 people a day in our state. It's this big problem. Supply and demand are the two big pieces. Supply side, break up the distribution cells that exist within our state. General Assembly just passed an anti-money laundering law. We were a state that didn't have one. We'll be very helpful in working with federal law enforcement to break apart those distribution cells.
I actually just read on our morning news about overdose deaths are trending in a better direction than they were, still not back to where they were before the pandemic. Is there any reason for optimism there?
Yeah, so that's actually the demand side. The demand side means addiction. We have gotten smarter with treating addiction. We've got Narcan out there, which helps reverse overdoses, but we've also just done a good job of treating addiction. The folks who are using fentanyl, they're not using it to get high. They haven't gotten high in years. They're using to stave off withdrawal, and the way you treat that is medicated assisted treatment. About a third of our counties are regularly doing that, saving a lot of lives.
I want to talk about crime. Youth crime specifically is a big problem. Republicans will be the first one to say Democrats are to blame, whether it's Democrats leading big cities like Charlotte or mind you. As the state's top law enforcement officer, what do you see as the Attorney General's role?
Well, first of all, I'm a former prosecutor. I'm the only one in this race who has ever prosecuted a case. I've worked with law enforcement. I have worked with victims. I know what modern effective prosecution looks like. Attorney General's role, first and foremost, be a champion for law enforcement. Make sure they are fully funded. I would champion a raise for law enforcement across the state to the General Assembly. Also, we need to make sure that judges have the discretion to keep people safe. Juveniles, you don't want them treated the same way as adults. You don't want them lumped together, but you do want to make sure that judges can say, hey, there's a particular risk here, and we're going to keep this kid off the streets in order to keep people safe. They should have that discretion.
Your opponent, Dan Bishop, touts the endorsements of a lot of law enforcement agencies. You talk about supporting them. Why don't you feel like you have some of the endorsements that he got?
I think I've got a lot of endorsements. I've got a lot of endorsements that he doesn't have. Just got endorsed by News and Observer, Charlotte Observer, Herald Sun. So I'll make my best case to law enforcement, ask them to support me as the only person who has ever worked with law enforcement and actually prosecuted a case.
Part of the job is getting ahead of crime trends and what we're seeing, and part of that is cracking down on scammers and specifically artificial intelligence. How do you do that? Stay one step ahead of some of those fraudsters.
Okay, you're absolutely right about that because this is a tidal wave that's coming. I'm specifically concerned about the effect of voice duplication technology. We know that senior citizens are the most likely group to get targeted here. We have a window of time in which to get ahead of it. I would go to the General Assembly. I need you to give me some new tools. What you need is to establish a reputation as a state for being very hostile to that type of predator in order to keep them away.
General Assembly, you mentioned the state recently passed that anti-money laundering law. This would be a new tool in the toolbox for an attorney general, whoever it is. How can you use that? And for folks at home, what does it really mean?
So it goes into effect this December. I would be the first attorney general who has access to it. One of the things it means is it makes it easier to do joint investigations with federal law enforcement. We have very active U.S. attorneys here in North Carolina. They have made a priority of fentanyl. It's going to make it easier to work with them, but also make it easier not just to bust low-level dealers. That's not really what we need to do. We need to move up the chain in the investigation to the folks running the distribution cells that operate within our state.
You talked about the General Assembly. As you know, it's Republican dominated, something that our current Attorney General has had to reconcile. How do you reconcile enforcing the laws that they pass when in some cases, as you know, you might not agree with them?
There's no reconciling. The job of Attorney General is to do that. You are the people's lawyer, but you are also the lawyer for the state, which means it would be my duty to represent the General Assembly or state agencies, even if I personally disagreed with them. And people should know going in, that is just the job of Attorney General.
You talk about supporting law enforcement in the state, especially when you talk about a crime and how it spiked in some places. How do you view an AG's role in doing just that?
Addressing crime that has spiked.
Supporting law enforcement agencies.
I'll give you a specific way the AG could support law enforcement. When people think of state law enforcement, they usually think of state highway patrol. We've got a lot of different types.
Much bigger than that, yeah.
Much bigger than that. DMV Theft Bureau would be an example. We clearly have a problem with auto theft. Their pay isn't standardized. It's variable. So some of them get a raise and some of them don't. I would be a champion for standardizing that pay to give all of them a raise.
A big issue for you before even this race, going back to your career in the state Senate, and even now in Congress, is gerrymandering.
Yeah.
Knowing the Attorney General, that's not really the purview of the Attorney General. Is that still going to be a case? Because I talk about it on this show. It's the least sexy topic, but the most important one, arguably, that people just don't totally get, because it's honestly, it's hard to explain on TV in a way that makes people understand it. What are you going to do about it?
Let me see if I can explain it on TV in a way that people will understand it, okay? If you let politicians draw their own districts, they will cheat. My party, when they were in power, they cheated. Now the other party is in power, and they're cheating. The people who lose are voters, because what they're deprived of is competitive elections. I'm in a very competitive election right now, because it's the whole state. And you can't redraw the map of the state for the election. But if you can draw your own map for the General Assembly or Congress, they will make it so that they don't have to worry about the voters. That's wrong.
And you found yourself the quote-unquote victim of this in your congressional district, because after they've been fairly evenly split because of a judge ruling, Republicans in the General Assembly went back and sort of renumbered the congressional delegation.
I wouldn't say that I was the victim, because voters are the victim, but I was on the receiving end of gerrymandering.
Receiving end, that's right. That's right. So you've seen it firsthand, but it presented you this opportunity for the Attorney General job.
Look, I went to law school to become a prosecutor. I worked there for several years, did a lot of serious cases. I consider running for Attorney General as an extension of my career as a prosecutor. All
right, Congressman Jeff Jackson. Congressman, thanks.
Thank you.
Good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
Best of luck on the campaign trail.
Thanks.
Less than 2 weeks to go at this point. All right, more Flashpoint coming up right after this. Up next on Flashpoint, we hear from the Republican candidate for Attorney General, Dan Bishop.